Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today we have an overdue guest, Michael Sjogren. Showtime, baby. First of all, before we even start, I gotta invite you to the lab correctly because you are, if I understand correctly, a Massachusetts native. Is that right? You got Massachusetts. We got Mass in the building. So that's cool because obviously you guys know the connection. We got two Massachusetts, I guess I should say. Is that what you call them? Anyways, I love my Bostonians or whatnot, but that's pretty cool. But the coolest thing is I'm so excited to have you, Mike, because obviously you and I have talked offline and worked together, and it's just fascinating to see what you're doing. But I actually want to get more into what you do. And so the high level, I'll give you an introduction, but I actually want you to actually tell us what you do, or when we meet you, what's your elevator pitch? Because you got a lot going on, my man, and I want to hear. So if I meet you in the airport or we're sitting, in the airplane and I shake your hand, and I say, what kind of work do you do? Or can you tell me about yourself? I know you're a family guy first and etc. But then what do you tell next?
I guess it depends on who I'm talking to, right? Because it's a lot of different things going on.
Good answer. If
it's more like a business person, I introduce myself as a professional short-term rental host, and I help investors and landlords maximize their cash flow through short-term rentals.
Oh, that will suck me right in, and then we'll go down that rabbit hole. But obviously, so you've done that, and we're gonna get right into that, right? And you've also recently, congratulations! I know you closed on your hotel. This is your first hotel, right? You've scaled into the hotel, which I'm very excited about. So congratulations to that. But then we're gonna talk about the man himself, the expert, the secrets behind the short rental term. Secrets that you've kind of been able to build together. Not only are you building a community, you're a practitioner, which we love in the lab, because that's who we have in the lab. We don't have people who just talk the talk. We have people also walk the walk. So first of all, why short-term rental? Like, tell me about that.
Yeah. So real quick backstory, right? So like a lot of folks, right? I was told, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, put 10% in a 401k, get that safe corporate job, whatever. Right. And, I did all that. I followed all that. I was working as an accountant at a, international company in corporate finance. Things were going quote unquote well, good salary, had the wife, the kid at home, the house, cars, whatever, standard suburban life. And then when our son was born, he was born with a rare disease called interstitial lung disease. And basically anytime he went to sleep, he needed to be on oxygen. His oxygen would get dangerously low. And so we spent a ton of time at the hospital, weeks at a time for the first year and a half of his life. And at one point we were sitting in the hospital and doctors are coming in and rattling off all these tests that they needed to do. And the only thing that I could think about, and it sounds terrible to say, was, I've been here for 3 weeks straight. I've got no more sick time, no more vacation time. And I have these mountain of hospital bills piling up. And I'm going to have to leave my wife and my son in this hospital to go back to my cubicle to trade time for money. And as a man, as a husband, as a father, it was like the worst pain I had ever felt. I felt like a complete failure. It was like a dagger in my side. I had to leave my, at the time, 6-month-old child and my wife there, freaked out because I need to go trade time for a paycheck. And that day I told my wife, I made a decision. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to find a way to build a business that does not rely on us to trade time for money so that I never put us in this situation again. And that just led me down this path of, I had been studying real estate for a couple of years and I was dabbling and trying to put in offers and raise money and do different things. And I was dabbling. Okay. And maybe some folks can relate to this where you're out there, you're kind of doing it. You're not fully committed. You want it to happen, but you haven't gone all in yet. But with this whole situation, I said, I'm going to find a way. And at the time I was in a mastermind group where I met a gentleman who was doing short-term rentals. And I had never even heard of the model before, right? I knew about vacation rentals, but what he was doing was he was going out and making anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a month in cash flow on properties that he didn't even own. And I was like, it sounded like a late night infomercial scam. And I was like, I'm like, all right, man, show me the data. Cause I'm I'm a numbers guy. So I'm like, show me the data. And sure enough, he was going out and essentially master leasing properties and furnishing them and then listing them on sites like Airbnb, et cetera. And, he was making the difference from whatever his lease payment was versus what he was making on those sites. And I remember telling my wife this, and I still wasn't totally sold on the master lease thing. I wasn't totally convinced, but I said, I feel like this niche, these short-term rentals, is the key with real estate to generating cash flow to get us to financial freedom way faster, right? If I buy a regular rental, maybe I make $200 to $400 a month in cash flow, right? But with a short-term rental, if I'm making $1,000 to $2,000 a month, I need a lot less properties to get there. So we went out, we pulled a loan out of our 401k. I bought a little 2-bedroom condo up in the mountains in New Hampshire, and renovated it, furnished it, and we said, okay, cool, this is great. We've got a vacation house now that we said that we would use as a family every month, no matter what. And then when we didn't use it, we would rent it out. And just like this guy said, I mean, it was cash flowing. It's still cash flows like $1,500 a month after everything, and I use it every month. And I was like, this is the coolest business model ever. I get to, go use this beautiful place, and it pays me every month too.
Yeah.
But the problem was I didn't have any more cash to keep going and buying more properties. So I had to think of another way to do it. And I said, well, what if I brought this model to landlords and just showed them, look, you have massive upside on this property. You invest in the furniture, I'll run it for you, and we'll just do a revenue split. You take 75 and I'll take 25, and we'll net you another 30 to 50% on your property. And I started going out, reaching out to landlords, going to networking events, got a lot of no's. A lot of people were like, no, I don't think so. That's not going to work, blah, blah, blah. But finally, I got a couple people to say yes. And after getting them results, for a few months, guess what? I mean, real estate's a pretty tight-knit community. So it's like they're telling all their other investor buddies that have properties like, hey, man, look at how much cash flow I made last month, right? And then my business just kind of snowballed really quickly. And over an 18-month window, we were up to, 15 properties in 5 different states. My wife and I both quit our jobs. I retired my mom, and it was crazy, man. It was just like, it just took off because we were able to scale so quickly.
Wow. Well, first of all, I tip my hat to you. And I think you left so many gems. So I'm going to just take a step back because, first of all, you called it dabbling, but in the lab, we call it experimenting. Now you experiment different models, and I'm talking about the umbrella of real estate, because that initially when I asked you, how did you pick this? It's, a lot of people come up to me or within the community, they might ask, I want to get into real estate. The question is, well, which kind of real estate? And I think the first, lowest hanging fruit is to identify, okay, first, you got to either get the experience from someone else and get an idea of how it works. And so dabbling is okay. And then go deep, right? Because some people just stay on that surface level and they don't go deep. So good for you for going in and taking action and following through. And I want to take the next question I want to ask you, though, is interesting. Take a step back to the short-term rentals guy. Initially, when he was pitching this, because I understand that your first was you invested your own money, was he pitching it as his own assets that he started with, or did he start with other assets? Do you recall if that was kind of any pushback or hesitance or something like that may have triggered that thought for you?
Say that. Can you rephrase?
So yeah, I guess what the question is, that gentleman that you went to the mastermind to, did he initially start with his own properties right away, or did he start with other people's properties?
Other people's properties. Interesting.
So you did what made you decide to start with your own property? Did you feel like you wanted to test it out first, or what was the initial thought process there?
Yeah, it was a little combination of that and the fact that we wanted to celebrate, because it took another almost a year from the time I made the decision with my wife in the hospital till we closed on the first one. And at that time, my son was, doing much better. He didn't need to be on oxygen anymore. And quite frankly, we wanted to celebrate and have a little vacation. And this was a cool way to do it and create some income for ourselves and just test the model, quite frankly.
Okay. So that was more or less the beta test. What did that next property look like after that? Okay, this is working. Do I go straight into the master lease? You said you started talking to landlords. What did the no, when they told you no, what was, what was your response, or what was what was the reason why you were receiving a lot of no's? Could you go back on that and recall?
So the biggest thing, and I teach this to my students now, that there were kind of a few different key components. So the first one is, it almost sounds too good to be true, right? The income is fantastic. But the real key thing was, they wanted control over who was in the property, and they were nervous that somebody's going to throw a party in the property and like destroy the property, right? Like that, when you see headlines about Airbnbs and properties, it's usually not in a good light. It's usually a couple bad apples that are, you know, having no control over the property, and there's 1,000 people in there and they're throwing a party. Yeah. So, you know, we came up with call it a 4-step system that helps mitigate all those risks, right? So we don't just let anybody book. They have to meet certain parameters that we set on the different platforms. We use security cameras on the outside of every property that we have. So we know if Susie and John book the place for them and their 2 kids, and I see 6 people show up, or 10 people, I know immediately, right? Then we use Wi-Fi locks, so nobody ever gets access to the same code or a key. And it creates, basically, from the time of check-in to check-out, they have their own unique code. It's the last 4 digits of their phone number, and it automatically expires. And then the kicker is, we have a device in all of our properties that a buddy of mine co-founded a company called NoiseAware. Nice. I always love giving them a plug, because this one always seals the deal. And it just plugs into an outlet, and it measures noise levels. It doesn't measure it. You can't hear conversations or anything. It just measures decibels. And my quiet hours are 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. So I have it set. So if they go over a threshold, I get a text message right away. Wow. And I call the guest. You know, it's only happened maybe 4 times over the last few years. Just, again, if you do a good job up front, you shouldn't have that issue. But, you know, it's happened a few times, and I just call the guest and say, hey, hope you're having a great time. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I did just get a noise complaint from the neighbors. And, you know, our quiet hours are 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. I got to ask you to tone it down, or we're going to have somebody come down and escort you off the property. And every time they're like, oh, geez, I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. Right.
First of all, so, that's genius. Were you finishing a point there? Because I don't want to interrupt your train of thought.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you just at a high level, right? Like we have eyes and ears on every property 24/7, which is how we were able to do it in, you know, 5 different states at one point.
Okay. So that's fascinating, first of all, because that's insane. But I like leveraging the technology. Taking it a step back, was that your initial pitch when you started working with landlords, or did that kind of progress along kind of what you could offer to them? So let's say I'm a landlord. What would that conversation sound like if you're trying to pitch this to me? I'd like to hear for the rest of our listeners. Yeah, for sure. So, you know, we have access to some data sites that pull historical data. So I could plug in an address of one of your properties, and it would give me an estimate of what that property would generate as a short-term rental, with seasonality and occupancy and average daily rates and everything based on historical data in your market in that neighborhood. So I print that out, and I show them, you know, as an example, one of the properties was generating $2,000 a month, and I have this statement that shows them that it should generate at least $46,000 a year. So going from 24 to 46, that's kind of like the first sticker shock of like, wow, like that's way more income, right? So I bring this is based on if you're renting it as a short-term rental, that number, or where does that 46,000 come from?
Yeah, so it's pulling historical data from Airbnb, VRBO, and HomeAway.
Wow.
So it's actual historical data on your comps in your neighborhood. So I show them that first, and then there's always like, yeah, but you know, I don't know about not having other people in the property. And then I have a little 2-pager that I walk them through about all these different systems that we use that I just explained. And it's like, listen, this is what we do. We generate you more income. You actually have more control over who's on your property, because again, we're quote unquote screening them before they get there. We have cameras on the property. We have noise sensors in the property. And if we have a problem, we can just go kick them out. Good luck kicking out a long-term tenant who's a pain in your butt, especially in Massachusetts. Right. So,
absolutely. So Mike, so really the pitch, Mike, is you may currently be a landlord right now who's listening, and you have tenants. Maybe it's going well, and maybe it's not going well. Maybe it's a headache, right? And your pitch essentially is, not only can we double your income, but we can also take away that headache, because we'll come in and run our operations, and we'll give you what I thought I heard was 25%. Am I correct?
Yes.
Wow, that's a hell of a pitch, man.
Right.
So Okay, that's fascinating. So why
And there's
isn't
less wear
everybody?
and tear. There's less
Yeah.
wear and tear on the property too. And I've had a lot of my maintenance supervisors, things like that do both short-term and long-term. And they're like by far, there is way less headaches and way less maintenance on a short-term rental. Because if you think of it, when you're actually going and staying somewhere, whether you're in a hotel or a short-term rental, you're typically only in the property from like 8 or 9 o'clock at night till like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And the majority of that time you're sleeping. Like most people say they want the kitchen, but most of our guests don't even use the kitchen. They really don't use the washer and dryer, right? Like they're not using most of the major appliances and they're primarily just sleeping. So.
Wow. That's okay. So if I'm listening to this and I'm like, man, Mike, come on. Like, that's not what the end game is. I'm hearing it's long-term investing. I'm hearing a lot of different models out there and I haven't heard this. Why am I hearing it now? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I just say, a lot of folks just aren't aware of it, but you'll see, and I called this a year ago, that you'll see a lot of the larger A-class apartment communities allocating like 5% of their units as short-term rentals because the cash flow is way too good to ignore.
Yeah.
Now, if you are a syndicator with larger multifamily properties, definitely look at that option. And then obviously just make sure that you're still going to be in compliance with your debt coverage ratios, because typically a bank, I don't think they're going to look at a short-term rental as a lease, right? So you can't, in my personal opinion, say that I wouldn't take 50% and make it an apartment complex just because of debt service coverage ratios and things like that. So a lot of my owners now, a lot of the properties I have are blended, right? They're 3 families, 6 families, and we'll do, 2 or 3 units as a short-term rental, and then the other's a long-term rental. So they're getting consistent cash flow from the long-term rentals. And then, some months are better than others, but over the course of a year, they're generating way more cash flow from the short-term rentals.
So, Mike, I'm so glad you touched on this because that was exactly where I was going next with that. That's a great segue. The type of properties. And I've heard, funny, we have actually a client of ours, she's in the Airbnb business, and I'll have to make the connection offline. But she mentioned something around actually leveraging HOA communities because then it's, she factors in the overhead. It's not kind of like a property management company. She runs her numbers and it makes sense. For you, what is it that you're looking for? Is there a rule? Do you strictly look at the numbers, or is there another kind of a specific type of property that makes the most sense for this business model?
Yeah. So the first question I always ask people is, who do you want to serve first and foremost, right? Like, who are you targeting? And for myself, especially when we got started, I wanted to attract families with kids and couples, because in my head, I was a guy with a family, right? And I just wanted to be around people that were similar to me, selfishly. And I also knew that I would have less headaches, right? So start with who you want to serve. And there's a ton of different genres, and I'll mention a link at the end where I have a deeper dive training where I kind of break down the 9 different reasons why people travel and who you could serve. So first is, who do you want to serve? Then the next question is do you want to be the Walmart, the Target, or the Nordstrom of your market? Right? So a lot of investors, especially when they're getting started, they focus a lot on the C-class properties because they're more affordable. They, on paper anyway, they look like they're going to cash flow better. I typically do not go for C-class properties with short-term rentals. That's just not who I serve, right? So I want to be more of that like B+ to A-class property. Most of my multis, I would say, are in the B-class range that we have for short-term rentals. I like to be in that Target, right? Like the upper Target, not necessarily Nordstrom. I do have a couple Nordstrom properties that are lights out, but my sweet spot for me is a 2 to 3 bedroom with 2 baths, because I can comfortably sleep 6 to 8 people, no problem. And with 2 bathrooms, it's not an issue with showers. Now, the next thing you want to think about is where, again, when you identify who you want to serve or who could you serve, when you're looking at where do you want to set up a property? So a lot of folks got crushed during COVID because they were only catering to one type of client, right? Whether it was a vacationer or whatever. All of our properties, actually, even our beach house in Florida did well during that time. But The majority of our properties, they're about 30 minutes outside of a major metro. So I don't operate inside of Boston. I don't operate inside of Asheville, North Carolina. I don't operate inside of, any major metro. I go about 30 minutes outside, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is typically the major metros, there's a lack of housing in general. So most of them are implementing regulations to highly restrict short-term rental activity in like the proper metros themselves, right? So like Boston, it's nearly impossible to run in Boston, right? So I'll go 30 minutes outside of Boston, find a nice town with either train or easy access into the city if they want that. But then I'll also look for, is there a university there? Is there a decent sized hospital there? What type of employment centers are there? How close is it to any local attractions? How close is it to a beach or some type of other activity? And when I blend all of those, or at least, 3 or 4 of them, I'm attracting a lot of different traveler profiles, whether it's traveling nurses, whether it's corporate travel, whether it's families, whether it's people that are looking to relocate because of business, right? So I'm attracting I'm diversifying my client base based on the locations that I choose. So even during a crazy time, during March, April, May, during COVID, we were still able to generate bookings. One, we adjusted our marketing, but 2, just because of the locations that we picked, we're within distance to a hospital. We weren't in a major city where everybody wanted to get the heck out of there, right? Like we had people just self-quarantining in a bunch of our properties, especially the vacation ones. So just like, if I'm going to quarantine, I might as well be on a beach in Florida or up in the mountains in New Hampshire, right?
That's fascinating. So Mike, let's talk about that, because I think people are, as I'm listening, to you, first of all, you're dropping so much knowledge, so thank you. But to our listeners, you might be wondering, and I'm wondering this, when we say short term, how short or how long is it? Because I'm curious as to, you talked about, you hit the nail when you're talking about the type of people. I'm starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together. You said university, maybe like a professor or someone who needs to take care of someone for a long time. How long is your typical client staying into one of your properties for?
Our average booking is 3 nights across the portfolio. Now, during March, April, May, that went up to 14 to 21 days. And then we actually had a couple people stay for 2.5 months in some of our properties. Right, just because they had nowhere else to go. So it just depends, again, on who you want to serve. But on average, I would say 3 days. That's our standard, or 3 nights. 4 days, 3 nights is our standard booking.
Okay, so with that, the turnaround time and the managing, you probably know where I'm getting with this. How are you structuring this? Because I heard you're in Florida, you're in, is it Massachusetts, of course, or is it Texas? Am I getting these right?
Yeah.
You're kind of scattered around 5 different markets. Am I correct?
Yep. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Florida, and we were in Texas. That property got sold, so we're not in Texas anymore, but we were in 5 states. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So how does that go into your strategy? Or let me start with this question, because man, I'm getting excited because I've never had so many questions myself with this model. When you're doing it locally, do you kind of factor in the zip code so that your management can kind of be within a certain amount of radius? Or how is that? Do you factor that in? Does that matter at all or no?
In hindsight, yes. Like I almost did it by accident because I found some geographic locations that worked well, and I just kept building up the portfolio in those areas. I wasn't thinking that way initially, but kind of by osmosis, I guess, or whatever. It worked out that way, right? So as an example, the team that I have cleaning my properties outside of Boston, they also handle all the cleanings here at the hotel because they're lights out and they're close enough, and I trust them and they know the quality standards that we have, that it was a lifesaver because I didn't have to retrain a whole new team or hire on-site staff to be here full time to clean.
Okay. So there's so many moving pieces to this operation, which I find fascinating. I'm going to talk or ask you about the structuring the deal for a second, but I want to go back for a second about the management. Average 3 nights, obviously we can say there's 30 days in a month. How are you managing, or are they taking it off your hands with the, when they need to go in, how they know that it's, without going completely into your business, just at a high level, How
Let
are
me
you
break it down.
managing all this, man?
Yeah, let me break it down. Because again, the whole
Yeah.
purpose of me starting this business was to create a business, not a job. Right?
Absolutely. Exactly. And I'm a
and
big systems guy, so I'm very, very interested in how you've systematized all this, because you have to. You don't want to be fully
exactly.
involved in that. Okay, excellent.
So there's
Let's
there's 4 key areas, and I do a deeper dive on that training I'll mention at the end, right? But the first
Plug.
one is, we'll mention that at the end.
Absolutely.
The first one is around pricing, right? We got to attract people, so we got to price the property correctly. So we use a dynamic pricing software that has an algorithm that basically can calculate way more than I could ever possibly do manually on my own, right? So as an example, if say my average rate is, I don't know, $150 a night on a Wednesday, but in 2 weeks, Beyonce's coming to town on Wednesday, I should probably charge way more, right? Now, I'm not staying up on pop culture and all that kind of, like, I don't have time to manage that manually. So this software does it automatically for me. It pulls in all the comps, what the current occupancy rates are, what the average rates are based on my property, and I can tweak it if I want, but it prices all my properties for me automatically. So that alone will not only generate you more bookings, it will set you up for way more revenue and higher occupancy just by having that one system. Then the next piece is, once you get the bookings, you're going to need an access system, right? Because again, I'm not dealing with lockboxes. I'm not going over there giving keys. I'm not doing any of that. So we use, like I mentioned earlier, we use Wi-Fi enabled locks, right? So the second somebody books, whether it's on Airbnb or any platform, the system automatically creates a unique code for that guest that's the last digit phone number, and it sends it to them in a sequence of automated messages. So I don't have to do anything. And that code is only valid from check-in to checkout time, and then it expires. So the access is automated. And then as a fail-safe, if that lock ever malfunctioned or batteries died or whatever, then we hide, just like an old school lockbox at the property. So if they ever get locked out, it's like, hey, here's an emergency lockbox, because I'm not running over there at midnight or whatever to do it. So we can just trigger a message to go out and handle that. Then the next piece is a guest communication system. If you don't have this will become a full-time job almost immediately. Like, the volume of messages that we get are in the tens of thousands a month at this point. Even if I had templated responses and I just had to copy and paste them, it would be a full-time job, like just doing that, right? So we have a system that, again, when somebody books, it automatically triggers a set of messages to go out that has all the information about the property that the guest could ever need. It follows up with them 3 days before. Hey, just a reminder, here's all your access instructions, parking, directions, the house manual, all that stuff. It follows up after they check in. Hey, is everything up to your liking? Let us know if you need anything, blah, blah, blah. But the sweet spot about the software that we use is it also has artificial intelligence. So it can detect, oh, this is a question about the pool or parking or whatever. And I can, over time, I basically built a database of all these frequently asked questions for each property. So it's like, oh, this is a question about the pool. It responds, hey, it looks like you got a question about the pool. Here's the hours. Here's the website. Here's what's offered, blah, 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 blah. So that goes out automatically, right? So that takes care of the communication. And then the last one is a turnover management system, which is cleanings and supplies. So again, we use another system that integrates with Airbnb and all the platforms that we're on. So when we get a booking, it notifies our cleaners, and they have their own app where they can see the calendar, but it also sends them a text message when we get a new booking. If the guest changes the dates or they cancel, it sends them a text message. It follows up with them the day before, and it reminds them again the day of, hey, we just remember we got a cleaning on this day. So then they go, we have all these checklists in the property, and we have, instructions on what we expect on the property to look like. They send us pictures when they're done. I can see right on the lock that they're there because they have their own unique code. So I know when they get there, or if they're trying to pull a fast one. I could always look at the camera if I really wanted to. And then they manage the supplies for me. So they take a picture of the supply closet, they track it every stay. And then when we get low, we just order I try and just do it in bulks, like once a month or once every 2 months. We'll just do a huge order to the local Target or the local Walmart, add the cleaner as the pickup person. They bring it to the property, take a picture of the closet, and then we start the process again. And if there's any maintenance requests, they let us know, and then they know who our handyman is, so then they can reach out and handle any of that stuff.
So in other words, Mike, you're the Elon Musk of short-term rentals. What? Dude, that's insane. No, I think like people know me as the system guy, but you literally just like blew me out. And I think that's fascinating. It almost sounds like it makes sense. I always say this, that your business is a reflection of who you are. And I've talked with you a bunch of times. You're a sharp guy, and this is a system it's a business that you've created. Obviously we know that, but it thrives because of your systems. Like I heard about 4 different softwares, and as you're saying this, my mind is racing because I'm thinking, but man, there's so many like booking platforms. There's like Airbnb, there's booking.com. So I'm going to ask this question for myself, and then we'll move on because we want to turn this into a geek session. But how are you integrating with a lot of the front facing applications that are out there? Where are these people communicating? This is a special one for me, guys. I got to ask this.
Yeah. So the guest communication software that we use, it integrates with all of them. So it creates like a centralized inbox, and it can respond to all the different platforms, and a direct website for some of our properties.
Wow. This is a publicly traded company. This is awesome. No, I'm all in. That's awesome, Mike. This fantastic. Look, I'm not going to let you get out of the lab here without talking about, well, there's probably going to be 2 elephants in the room, but let's go back. Master lease, structuring those out. Right now, my question is, I'm always thinking, okay, the reason I love systems is because systems allow us to scale. Okay. So how are you putting together all these master leases? I know we touched a little bit about it.
I don't do a master lease at all. So mine is more of like a management agreement. So again, there's 3 ways to make money with short-term rentals. You can buy a property, you can master lease somebody's property, or you could co-host or manage somebody's property. I went with the last one because if you go to master lease, you still need your first month's rent, your last month's rent, security deposit, and investing in all the furniture. And if you have a down month or whatever, you got to come out of pocket and pay the owner regardless. My system doesn't work that way. I don't invest any of my own cash in the deals. I just run the operation. And again, if the property doesn't do as well, okay, then I don't make much money, but I never come out of pocket. But that's other than April and May, when it was slower with COVID, we still made money. I just didn't make as much, but I never had to come out of pocket. The guys that were hurting were the ones that have these master leases in these A-class properties that are paying $2,500 a month or whatever. If you're not generating revenue and you've got 50 units at $2,500 a piece, that's a big liability on your books, right? My model is more sharing in the upside with the owners. They get more upside, I get more upside, and it's just a win-win all around.
So this goes back to our conversation about going deep, right? And this is what I like about this, because you've tried all 3 as a practitioner. You bought your own. I guess, did you do the master lease at one point, or did you just say no? Let's go with co-managing, which I'm assuming is that the 75-25 split? Is that what co-managing is? So you're not on the hook for the mortgage.
Correct. Correct.
You're a genius, Mike. That's what we have, guys. We have a genius in the lab, y'all. Thank you. No, this is great. So that was the one elephant in the room, because I know people are, that's the too good to be true nugget that I want to make sure we bring home so that people can find out from the man himself, because you told us, and this is a process, and I think that's fascinating. So thank you for sharing that. The Keeping It Real segment, let's talk about, okay, real time. You said you guys, everybody's getting hit, some people in different ways, and some people just a little bit less than others, and some people are actually thriving. You said you got hit a little bit, but you're still making money. How is that? How have your properties, I guess, been impacted, if at all, in this current circumstance?
Yeah, for sure. So first and foremost, I'm sure you've probably read this book, but Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Okay. I teach all my students to follow the principles that he teaches in this book, which is basically like you have 5 bank accounts and you just fund them percentages every month. So I had plenty of reserves going in, even if we weren't making any money, to just fund us through whatever we needed. So it's just basic money management. So that's first and foremost, like, okay, great. You make 10 grand a month on these properties. Cool. reserve some of that, because it's not always sunshine and rainbows. Okay. We got to be fiscally responsible too. Different properties did better than others, right? So like I mentioned, the Florida beach house, that one was tough because we had like, it was either 13 or 15,000 in bookings for March for spring break, but then they closed all the beaches. So it went like poof. Yeah. So that was a big hit. We ended up getting a few bookings in there, but it was nowhere near, 13 grand. We had a couple different groups that stayed. And again, they just wanted to self-quarantine somewhere nice. We put them in there. We made a little bit of money, made our owners some money, and we kept it moving. The properties that did relatively well were, again, 30 minutes outside of the city. There were some amenities nearby. They could have groceries delivered. It was more about shifting our marketing to, essential travelers only, long-term discounts available, and just, again, getting a little more creative. Like we could offer you a, oh my God, I'm blanking on the name, but grocery deliveries, like including like an Instacart gift card, right? If you want to stay for a week, we'll throw in $100 Instacart gift card, like things like that to start attracting those types of people. But yeah, for sure. Like it definitely took a hit. And then just like I said, this is going to suck for 2 months. And then once the fear and everything kind of goes away and they open things back up, it was like right out of the gate. We had some of our best months yet. Starting in June. So
and I think it's interesting too that you said some folks are actually staying longer than they usually would, just because of the fact that they feel that your properties are actually fitting for them to be in a quarantine environment, which I think says a lot about the comfort of your units and homes. So that's fantastic. The other thing I want to touch on before we pivot and transition into the last round here is. We talked a little bit about this of, what type of property. I think you mentioned 2 to 3, I think it was two bedrooms, 2 to 3 bathrooms, 2 to 3 bedrooms, 2 to 2 bathrooms, right? But you're talking about, properties, and you keep saying with the S, and I'm so curious about the S. Is it that I would go into, a building and negotiate for X amount of units? Like, how are you doing it when you're scaling now? Because it sounds like it, but I'm not sure if I captured that correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. So as an example, we've got a sixplex about 30 minutes outside of Boston. They gave us 1 unit to test it out. It's done very well. And in a couple of weeks, we're onboarding another one, right? So when I tell people that if you're looking to scale it and again, create a full-time income for yourself, whether you want to quit your job, just be financially free, whatever it is for you, if you take a step back and think of what is the path of least resistance. So there's different types of property owners that you could work with. You could work with vacation rental owners, which is fine, right? But the language that you use with them is going to be completely different than if you're talking with an investor who's talking cash on cash, IRR, debt coverage ratios, things like that. A traditional, person that has a vacation house, they're going to look at you and their eyes are going to glaze over because they have no idea what you're talking about. But secondly, if you work with investors, typically they own multiple properties or they're continuing to invest in more and more properties. So if I do a good job for one person, that will, 1, they'll refer me to their friends, but then 2, as they buy more and more properties, guess what? They're going to take me along for the ride, right? So that's how we've built our business, is really focusing on entrepreneurs that make a certain amount of money that are into real estate and they're growing their portfolios, and then we just grow with them.
Excellent. So short-term rental secrets, because I know, again, this is why we love having you in the lab. We focus on having practitioners, and then we are very big on building communities, obviously, and teaching others. Do you find that you're working with a lot of investors to co-manage so that you can co-manage with them, or are you teaching them your model so that they can do what you do with other systems? Like, which one is it, Mike?
I teach them so that they can do it without me. It's like, I want you to build your own business, right? So the goal of that, it's funny, my mentor asked me probably 4 or 5 years ago, he said, if you had 10 million bucks in the bank and you were making $1 million a year or whatever, he's like, what would you want to be doing? And this was when I was still, at a desk job. And I said, I'd want to be teaching financial education, because I was so frustrated. I got my undergrad, an MBA, a CPA, all these alphabets after my name, and nobody ever taught me actually how to make money. And it was like so frustrating. and it cost a fortune to go through all that stuff. And so I said, when I get financially free, I'm going to teach people how I did it. So hopefully they can do the same. And that was 4 or 5 years ago when he asked me that question. And for me, I just love teaching. Like, it just lights me up. Like, it's fun doing these cool deals. Like this hotel, this was awesome. But honestly, like when I'm helping somebody else get into their first deal or their third or their fourth, whatever it is, like, as you know, man, like you're helping people all the time. Like, it's way more fulfilling. It just
absolutely
is.
You said the key word. That's the F word, and that's the fulfillment. And I think we can hear it beaming in your voice, and we appreciate that genuine energy. Before I transition into the man, because I want to talk, you talked about your mentor, and I know you really, I mean, you must at this point. Anybody who comes to the lab has spent just as much time investing in themselves, in and it reflects in their life and their business, etc. I want to talk. I congratulated you earlier with the hotel. So big kudos to you and your family and your team. That's amazing. What is that next phase look like for Mike and his team? Is it the hotel game so you can kind of turn on the model, turn it off as you please? What was that vision like?
Yeah, for sure. So my growth going forward on the property side is to do more of these basically flipping these mom and pop boutique hotels. Like that's the direction that I'm going. I can scale way faster, and quite frankly, I'm just having a blast doing it. And it's kind of like the next iteration. So I actually was visiting one today. I think we're going to be putting an offer in another 11 units plus possibly 2 apartments that might come with it, which is ironic because it's the same exact size as this one. Different market, but again, it's for those of you guys that, you follow maybe Jake and Gino, like that was their whole thing, right? With their multifamilies, the mom and pops. I'm doing the same thing just with boutique hotels. So I'm finding these older boutique hotels that have kind of gone downhill. They haven't made the investments. They're getting tired. They just want to get out of the game. And we're getting creative with different financing and different investment strategies and just bringing them back to life and leveraging all the technology that I use with the short-term rentals to drastically reduce our overhead and increase our revenue.
Okay, so is it going to be the same model that you use at scale for short-term rental? Is it going to? Okay, and that makes sense, right? You're just playing at a bigger platform. That's awesome, man. And what's the end goal for Mike? Is it liquidation? Oldham owning these properties outright. What do you see as your goal? Are you still figuring that out?
I mean, for me, I've got 2 partners in this deal, they're amazing. And ironically, again, going back to when you deliver a good service, right? I was managing one of these guys' properties for a year and we were doing incredible with it. And then he brought me this deal. And now I'm a third owner in this hotel, right? So awesome. For me, it's just continuing to scale that. I don't plan on selling them. I just want to keep them, let them cash flow, nice. Refi them, continue to build the portfolio. And again, build the team, continue to build the systems and just continue to grow it. So again, then I can, at one point I was telling one of my mentors, I was like, I think I'm going to cap it at like 50. And she called me out. She goes, don't you dare. She goes, you're doing your students a disservice because at some point, one of your students is want to go to 100 and you're not going to be able to take them there because you were too lazy. And I was like, okay.
I love that. That reminds me of a quote I recently heard. It's like, it's not about you. It's about who loses if you don't win. I mean, I love that when it's bigger than you and good for you for taking that next leap. Damn, this is a good one, Mike. I love this. So let's get into it. Let's transition into the man behind, the wizardry, all this that you're doing, man. It's fantastic. Talk about it. Who is someone in your life? It could be a mentor of some sort that was very monumental to you. Maybe, you talk about financial literacy. I think we all need that. Is there something or someone that comes to mind that kind of flipped the switch? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I've, Rock Thomas has been a mentor of mine for coming up on 4 years now. He runs a mastermind group called M1. And I mean, since I met that guy, man, my entire life has completely changed, from everything, not just on the business side. I mean, the business side is great, got out of the jobs, all that stuff. But I mean, my relationship with my wife, my son, I've run a half marathon, a full marathon. I was training for an Ironman until this whole COVID thing hit, like just all different areas of my life. And his big thing was, yeah, we'll get you, over the $1 million mark and beyond, which was great. But he's like, we want you to become a whole life millionaire, because you've got to have the whole picture. Because if you just have the money and you don't have the relationships, or if you don't have their health, or if you don't have your spirituality, like it's not fulfilling. You got to have the whole package. And he just drilled that into me, and, shifted a lot of my mindset, and just the power of your mind, between your ears, man, it's everything. It's literally everything.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to ask you, is there, it's so many things, and I think this is the engine we need to work on and invest in the most, but is there do you think, like, let's talk about this for a second. We talk about it a lot. Like, I've been a bunch of masterminds and invested myself a ton in my team. And it's just, do you think that it's in it and it's in us and we need someone to pull whatever that it is out of us? Or do are we actually subconsciously blind and we just need vision from someone who's been there? Like, which one? Is it both? Is it one or the other? Like, what are your thoughts when you've kind of invested so much time into working on yourself?
Yeah. Just a tidbit. I journal every morning. I write out, all my affirmations, all my goals every single morning. And for those of you guys that are not doing that, I would highly, highly encourage you to do that. But we all have these, Bob Proctor calls them paradigms, right? These limiting beliefs, or these habits that are in our subconscious. Okay. I'm going to go a little deep here. So I'll try.
Please.
I'll try and keep it high level enough. But if you think of it, right, like 95% of the time we're running on autopilot, right? Like we've all had that experience where we've pulled into the office and we're like, I don't even remember driving here, right? Like we're constantly operating on autopilot by these paradigms. So as you build these up based on your upbringing and your environment, you're preconditioned to do certain things, whether you realize it or not, right? So like for me, some of the paradigms that I'm like trying to smash right now, not trying, that I am smashing right now, is just around like general health and fitness, right? And just like paying attention to certain things that I eat. And, I don't feel like working out today. Okay, well, tough luck. Go work out, right? Like just all those little things. Or if I'm driving by a Starbucks, right? Like that's part of my paradigm is I just pull in and I just get an iced coffee. That's just subconsciously it's in there. For whatever reason, I have linked Starbucks coffee to feeling better, right? But so many of us, we have these limiting beliefs or these paradigms that keep us from actually achieving what we want. For me, I knew like my original goal was $5,000 a month from real estate. And I was like, if I could just make $5,000 a month, that would be amazing, right? But I never felt like it was actually possible. It was like, Ruben could do it, but I can't do it. And we all have these limiting beliefs. And I had the pleasure of meeting Jeff Hoffman, who was the founder of Priceline.com and a bunch of companies. He's a multi-billionaire, amazing guy, amazing. He was so cool. And he said, you know what? I hate to break it to you, but that voice never goes away. So you basically just got to learn how to deal with it and just command yourself to just act in spite of the fear anyway, and just do it. And the thing that I learned from Rock is we need a few different things. We need an environment to support, encourage, and challenge us. And being in an accountability group, like as an example, I just joined another mastermind. It was fairly expensive. It was about $9,000 for this mastermind, right? Yeah. Very, very high level mastermind. And as part of the mastermind, we need to do this daily journaling exercise, and we post it in the group. If you miss a day, you're out, no refund. That's accountability.
Wow.
Right? So like,
I like that.
Put yourself in situations where you have to succeed. Before I bought my first property, I went to Rock and I was like, I want to do, and he just looked at me and he goes, excuse my language. He goes, are you going to share to get off the pot? He goes, are you going to do this thing or what? And at our annual mastermind event in front of, 100 or 200 people, I got up on the stage and I said, I will close on my first short-term rental property by December 31st, or I will sell my motorcycle and I will eat dog poop on camera and post it on Facebook. And just like high level accountability. And guess what? We closed on that property at the end of the year.
I think you had to, man.
I'll find a way.
Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. Yeah. So
just surrounding yourself with, high high-minded people, I would say, positive people that are pushing towards their potential. Like, that's why I love talking to you. Cause like you and I, we think similarly, like we're pushing, we're always growing. We're trying to figure out ways to give back, to constantly expand. When you get around people like that, you just grow by osmosis. One thing is going to happen. If you surround yourself, if you're worth $10,000 right now and you hang out with 5 millionaires, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to level up or you're going to leave because you're way too uncomfortable. It's one of those two things. So I surrounded myself with people that were earning way more than I was, and they just, by osmosis, it just pulled me up. Like, this was like expected. This was like, of course you're going to do that. Like, why wouldn't you do that?
Absolutely. Like, why settle?
Yeah.
Go higher. Yeah, no. Man. Mike, I love this, man. Core fire rapid questions here, wrapping it up. Favorite book, man. You got a favorite book for us, for the people, for the lab?
I'm going to throw out two, because one of them a lot of people already hear, and it's Think and Grow Rich. The second one, though, is a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, which a lot of people may not have heard before, but I highly recommend that one. And a bonus, I'll throw out Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. Again,
I haven't heard that one.
That one, he kind of explains more of the science behind all those other ones that I recommended.
Okay, that's awesome. Thanks for that. See, always over delivering. You ask the guy for one book, he gives you 3. That's what you get with Mike, guys. I'm just saying. Best habit that serves you every day. I think I got it. It's not journaling. What is it? Is it?
That's part of it. It's more higher level, though. It's getting myself in the right state. It's choosing how I'm going to feel in the morning, and like not fighting the urge to pick up the phone and start checking emails. It's like, no, I am choosing to put myself in a state, which the journaling helps me do, where I am attracting what I want every single day. Like, I just attract it. Again, I mentioned earlier, that second hotel deal came out of left field yesterday. Like, hey, do you want to go look at it? Yep, let's do it. Right? Just constantly putting myself, reviewing those goals every day and just visualizing myself achieving them every day.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, and you're doing the work. There's no, I mean, you are doing the work, or you're putting systems that will do the work. And so you're the mastermind behind all of your creations. So kudos to you. Best tool that helps you excel throughout your day. It could be an application. It could be a book. It could be anything.
I would say on Sundays, I map out my week. So I review my goals every Sunday, and then I map out, okay, what are the actions that I can take this week that are going to move me towards those goals? And I schedule it right in my calendar. So like it's time blocked right in my calendar. And then every day before the next day, I review the calendar. What do I need to get done tomorrow? And just kind of pre-planning tomorrow today.
Yeah. I like that. Pre-planning tomorrow today. That's dope. I got to ask you this: 124 unit apartment or 124, or 24 short-term rentals? And this is tough because I put you in the situation. This is the baby you're sitting in right now, if I assume, or wherever you're at currently. So
I would say the 24 unit apartment, as long as I could convert some of them to short-term rentals, because you have the economies of scale. It's one roof, not 24 together. Roofs. It's 1 or 2 furnaces, not 24. It's just economies of scale is where it's at. And that's why I love the boutique hotels, because you can scale faster and you can centralize operations.
Got it. Self-manage or outsource?
I mean, for me, I built up my own thing. I built my business. I basically built a management company. Yeah. Right? But if you're somebody that is just looking to invest, especially like with big apartments and you've never done it before, I don't want to steer anybody in the wrong direction, but typically like go with a reputable third-party management company and then just manage them to your expectations. But it's up to you. Otherwise, you gotta learn it one way or another. There's no way around it.
Absolutely. Learn before you delegate too, right?
Yes.
If you had one superpower, Mike, I mean, we talk about personal development, or maybe you want to tell us something that you're really trying to tap in on and double down on, what would that superpower be?
I think for me, it's just positivity and certainty. Like when I foster that, when I was talking about dabbling at the beginning, it wasn't that I was dabbling in a lot of different things, testing the waters. It was more of I never made a decision that I was going to do it no matter what. So now it's like when I train my mind to just know and have absolute faith that I will achieve it, I just do it. It just happens. You operate differently when you act with certainty than if you kind of waft in like wanting and hoping. It's a totally different state of mind.
Yeah. And that starts with a decision essentially. And I think most people don't, I don't want to go into this rabbit hole, but this is a very passionate conversation of mine is I feel we're not very aware, and therefore we're not rooted. And because we're not rooted, we don't get to choose what we want. And because we don't know what we want, we dabble. And because we dabble, we don't get what we want, and we don't have a direct line of focus. So it all goes back to personal development. And I can't tell you enough how many people, I mean, you guys, by now, if you're listening to the show and you don't hear the blueprint over and over again, I just don't, there's no shortcut. And it's just fascinating to hear that again, over and over again. It's like a muscle. I need to hear it too. And that's why if you're listening, it's great that you're listening to this because it's a proof of concept in front of you right here. Listen, look, you're a software guy. Last second question here. What's the newest piece of software that maybe you find is so helpful for you in your day-to-day or maybe in your operations? You don't have to name the name for your operations, but maybe there is one that you're comfortable dropping for yourself or your team.
Yeah. So one tool that we've implemented now that, my team has grown is using Monday.com, and it's helped me kind of keep tabs on everybody, and I can delegate tasks and I can see when they're getting done. And I'm scratching the surface. I'm sure I'm not using it to its max capability, but it's definitely helped me, before I was going just from like Google Drive and Google Docs and Sheets to just having this where we can all kind of collaborate in one system is definitely helped.
Yeah, that's. I'm so glad you said that because we're looking. Well, we use Choir, which is very similar and really nice. I'll share with you, but you don't need it. Monday is great. We have a few clients using it. That's awesome. Great plug. I mean, Mike. First of all, I can't thank you enough for stepping into the lab. I mean, the value that you gave. I gotta give you. This is your floor. This is your moment. You gave us so much value. Now, how can the people, again, practitioners who want to take action, find out more about you, find out more about what you can do for them because you are a servant, you're serving people. Where can they find out more about Michael Sjogren?
Yeah, for sure. So you can, follow me on Facebook and Instagram at the Airbnb guy. You can check out my website, strsecrets.com. Ruben and his team have been helping me launch my new podcast, Short-Term Rental Secrets. We got 7 episodes up right now. Got some amazing guests and a bunch more scheduled. So, we'd love for you guys to check that out. Give it a like, subscribe, and write a review. That would definitely help me continue to get the word out. And again, it's just about adding value. And if it's something that you want to pursue further, great. Then let me help you do it. Or at least go through, watch the free trainings, listen to the podcast, and I guarantee you're going to get a ton of value out of it.
Absolutely. And that's myself included. I will be plugged in. We'll make sure we include all those call to actions in the show notes. Mike, thanks so much for dropping into the lab, my friend. This was a fantastic one, and continue to build.
Thank you. Appreciate being on, man.
Awesome.